Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales that we're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. Don't bother coming to this one, Liz said, her smile wavering like a lie caught mid-breath. The words hung between us, casual yet calculated, as if testing the strength of the air they traveled through. 3 days before the company party, that was when my world, perfectly framed like a portrait on the wall, began to crack. My name is Albert Brown. I'm 46 years old, a seasoned account manager for a thriving manufacturing firm. To anyone who asked, I had it all. A 25-year marriage to my high school sweetheart, Elizabeth, or Liz as everyone called her. A sprawling lakefront home near Arlington. A daughter, Maria, so ambitious she was already engaged to William, a young man from a family far wealthier than ours. But the truth of a perfect life is that its fractures are often invisible until they aren't. That night, as Liz dismissed my attendance with that polished smile, something about her struck me as off. Her words had no warmth, no real interest in my presence. Just a polite dismissal, as if to say, don't concern yourself with my world. For 25 years, I had trusted Liz like the sky trusts the horizon, bound together despite our differences. But in that moment, something small but sharp pierced through me. An instinct, a flicker of doubt, lit a spark in my chest. Still, I ignored it. After all, Liz was Liz, my partner, my confidant, the woman who once shared ramen noodles with me in a dingy college apartment and laughed as if it were a feast. But that Saturday night at the party was where it all unraveled. Liz had always been stunning, with blonde hair that refused to gray and piercing blue eyes that lit up a room. But that night, in a sleek black dress that hugged every curve, she wasn't just stunning, she was performing. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't for me. We arrived at the venue, a glittering banquet hall buzzing with energy, and the first thing I noticed was how everyone's gaze lingered on her. Liz always had a way of commanding attention, but tonight, the air was different. People weren't just admiring her. They were complicit. And then I saw him. The man was in his early 50s, his gray hair combed back with a precision that mirrored his arrogance. He exuded confidence. Too much of it. Like he belonged to a world where rules bent around his desires. His suit was tailored to perfection, and the smirk on his face sent a chill down my spine. He made a beeline for Liz, cutting through the crowd like a shark in still waters. Before I could even process what was happening, Liz turned toward him with a smile that wasn't hers, not the one I knew. This smile was warmer, more intimate, and it sliced through me like a blade. Albert, she said, her voice light, almost dismissive. This is Chad Smith, one of my sales reps. Chad extended his hand, and I took it out of politeness. His grip was firm, his smile overly friendly. I've heard so much about you, he said, though his eyes barely glanced at me. His attention was fixed on Liz, as if I were nothing more than an inconvenient shadow. Likewise, I lied. For the next hour, I watched. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help myself. Liz floated around the room, charming everyone with her effortless charisma. She always had a knack for making people feel special, but tonight, her attention kept drifting to one person, Chad. Every glance, every laugh shared between them, felt like a slap across my face. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was overthinking, letting my paranoia twist harmless interactions into something sinister. But then came the dance floor. Liz loved to dance, and we had always been a good pair. I led, she followed. Tonight, though, as we swayed to the music, her movements felt stiff, distracted. Her eyes weren't on me, they were scanning the crowd. And when I turned her in a slow spin, I saw where her gaze landed. Chad stood at the edge of the dance floor, his arms crossed, his smirk infuriatingly smug. He wasn't just watching, he was waiting. When we returned to our table, I tried to shake off the unease. Liz excused herself to get another drink, and I watched her weave through the crowd, her black dress catching the light with every step. And then, as if pulled by some invisible force, Chad followed. They met at the bar, their conversation too quiet for anyone but them. I saw her lean in closer, her lips moving in words I couldn't hear. But I didn't need to hear them. Her body language, the slight tilt of her head, the way her hand brushed his arm, it all screamed of familiarity. And then I caught it. One word that changed everything. Darling. She said it softly, almost tenderly, and it echoed in my mind like a gunshot. My heart raced, my hands clenched into fists under the table. Every instinct screamed at me to confront them, to march up to that bar and demand an explanation. But I stayed seated, frozen by the weight of realization. This wasn't a hunch. It wasn't paranoia. This was betrayal. The days that followed were a blur of suspicion and anger, each one worse than the last. Liz carried on as if nothing had changed, her smile as warm as ever, her touch just as familiar. But I couldn't shake the images from that night. The glances, the whispers, the word darling. I needed answers. Real answers. So, I did what any man would do when the foundation of his life begins to crack. I sought the truth. Hiring David Carter, a private investigator, was a decision born out of desperation. He came highly recommended, a no-nonsense professional with a reputation for discretion. I told him everything. The party, Chad, the moments that didn't add up. Find out if there's anything to find, I told him, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. David didn't waste time. Within days, he sent me the first set of photos. I stared at them in disbelief, my heart pounding in my chest. Liz and Chad, walking into a motel. Liz and Chad, kissing in the parking lot. Liz and Chad, smiling as if the world belonged to them. Each photo was a punch to the gut, each one chipping away at the woman I thought I knew. I wanted to confront her right then, to shove the evidence in her face and demand answers. But I held back. David was thorough, and I needed the full picture. The evidence piled up over the next few weeks. More photos, video recordings, even audio clips. It wasn't just a fling. It was a calculated, ongoing affair. They met during lunch breaks, after work, even on weekends. But the worst part? The recordings. Hearing Liz laugh about their office wife arrangement made my blood boil. Albert would never suspect, she said in one clip, her tone casual, dismissive. He's too busy with work to notice. That stung more than anything else. She thought I was a fool, a man too blind to see the truth right in front of him. But she underestimated me. By the time David handed me his final report, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't just confront her. I wouldn't just demand answers. I would make her regret ever underestimating me. The envelope sat heavy on the kitchen table the next morning, a silent accusation wrapped in manila. Liz hummed softly as she flipped pancakes on the stove, the smell of butter and syrup wafting through the air. It was an ordinary morning, a routine that had played out countless times in our 25 years together. Except this time, I wasn't the same man sitting at the table. Liz, I began, my voice calm but laced with ice. You'd never betray me, right? She froze, her hand gripping the spatula mid-flip. Slowly, she turned to face me, her blue eyes wide with something that almost looked like guilt before she covered it with a practiced smile. Of course not, Albert. Why would you even ask that? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I reached into the envelope and pulled out the first photo, sliding it across the table. Her smile faltered as she stared at the image. What is this? She whispered, her voice trembling. You tell me, I replied, sliding another photo across the table. And then another. With each one, her face drained of color, her composure cracking like a fragile mask. Albert, I can explain. Explain what? My voice was calm, steady, but every word carried the weight of my fury. That you've been sneaking around behind my back. That you've been lying to me for over a year. It's not what it looks like, she stammered, her hands trembling as she reached for the photos. I don't love him. It's just physical. It doesn't mean anything. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. It doesn't mean anything? You destroyed 25 years of marriage for something that doesn't mean anything. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. For the first time, her pain didn't matter to me. The woman standing before me wasn't my Liz. She was a stranger, a liar. She launched into a flurry of excuses, her voice desperate. She talked about loneliness, about how she felt neglected, about how she thought I wouldn't notice. Every word felt like another knife twisting in my gut. "Stop," I said, my voice cold. "I've heard enough." Liz looked at me, her tears falling freely now. "Albert, I made a mistake. Please, we can fix this. I still love you." But love didn't mean the same thing anymore. Not after what she'd done. "You want to fix this?" I leaned in, my eyes locking onto hers. "Then start by packing your things. You're leaving." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She stared at me as if I'd struck her, but I didn't flinch. For 25 years, I had given her everything, my trust, my loyalty, my love. And now I was taking it back. If confronting Liz had been painful, what came next was worse. Maria, my daughter, my pride and joy, called me the next day. Her voice was filled with concern, but not for me. "Dad," she began cautiously, "Mom told me you had a fight. What's going on?" I hesitated for a moment before telling her everything. Liz's affair, Chad, the evidence. I didn't hold back. Maria listened in silence, and for a brief moment, I thought she might understand. But her response shattered me. "Dad, it's not that big of a deal," she said, her tone dismissive. "People have affairs all the time. It's not the end of the world. Not a big deal." I repeated, incredulous. "Your mother betrayed me. She lied to me for over a year." Maria sighed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Look, I'm not saying it's okay, but maybe you're overreacting. Mom loves you. She just made a mistake." "A mistake?" My voice was rising, anger bubbling to the surface. "She destroyed our family, Maria. How is that just a mistake?" And then she said the words that would haunt me. "Maybe you should just let it go, Dad. It's not like you've been perfect either." I was speechless. My own daughter, the person I had sacrificed so much for, was defending Liz. The final blow came when Maria casually added, "Oh, by the way, Mom and I were talking, and we think Chad should come to the wedding. He's important to her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "If Chad is at your wedding," I said, my voice icy, "then I won't be." "Dad, don't be ridiculous." "I'm serious, Maria. If he's there, I'm not." And with that, I hung up. Liz's betrayal was one thing. Maria's was another. But together, they lit a fire in me that refused to die. I wasn't just angry. I was determined. They thought they could walk all over me, that I would sit back and let them humiliate me, that I'd play the fool while they carried on. They were wrong. I started planning in secret, every step methodical and deliberate. Liz had no idea how much control I had over our finances. While she played house with Chad, I moved everything I could, our savings, our investments, into accounts she couldn't trace. I refinanced the house, took out loans, and left the debts in her name. The BMW she loved so much, I borrowed against it, leaving her to deal with the fallout. But that was just the beginning. Liz and Maria wanted to rebuild their lives without me. Fine. But I'd make sure they started from the ground up. Every night, I sat across from Liz at the dinner table, playing the part of a husband willing to move forward. She smiled, made small talk, and acted as if she'd won. She thought my confrontation had been the climax, the storm that passed. Little did she know, I was the eye of the hurricane. Over the next few weeks, I executed my plan with precision. I withdrew the maximum allowable funds from our shared accounts, transferring them to offshore accounts under names she would never recognize. Liz wasn't financially savvy. She left all the financial planning to me. That ignorance was now her downfall. Meanwhile, I handled our home. 15 years ago, we had purchased it outright, a fact Liz loved to brag about to her friends. What she didn't know was that I'd refinanced it multiple times over the years for investments she never asked about. I secured a new loan for $2 million, tying it solely to her name. Her beloved BMW? That was next. I took out a loan against the car, secured $40,000, and funneled it into my private account. By the time I was done, every major asset we owned was mortgaged or tied to debts she'd be responsible for. Liz didn't notice a thing, too caught up in her fantasy life with Chad to see the storm brewing on the horizon. Maria's wedding was supposed to be the culmination of everything she'd ever dreamed of, a grand affair with no expense spared. I'd initially agreed to fund the event, signing off on lavish decorations, a live band, and an open bar. But Maria's dismissal of my pain and her defense of Chad had soured everything. One morning, I made a call to the wedding planner. "Hi, this is Albert Brown," I said. "I won't be funding the wedding anymore. You'll need to discuss payment with Maria or her mother." There was a long pause on the other end. "Mr. Brown, the deposits." "Keep them," I said, cutting her off. "Consider it compensation for your trouble." I hung up, my chest tight with anger. If Maria wanted Chad at her wedding, she could let him foot the bill. I wasn't done. Maria's fiancé, William, was a decent young man from a respectable family. I decided he deserved to know the truth about what he was walking into. I called him, arranging a meeting at a nearby cafe. Over coffee, I laid everything out. The affair, Maria's casual dismissal of it, her insistence on having Chad at the wedding. I even played him the audio recordings of Maria saying, "It's not a big deal. Men cheat all the time." William's face darkened with every word. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally, his voice steady but pained. "I had no idea." 2 days later, Maria called me in tears. "William called off the wedding," she sobbed. "Why would you do this to me, Dad?" "You did this to yourself, Maria," I said, my voice cold. "You chose to side with your mother and her affair partner. Now live with the consequences." The first cracks in Liz's world appeared a week after I walked out. The loan against the house went through, and the bank wasted no time contacting her. Liz called me in a panic, but I didn't answer. Her second call came after the BMW payments started piling up. Then came the credit card bills, now maxed out from the wedding deposits and her lavish spending. Chad wasn't much help. His wife, armed with the evidence I had anonymously sent her, filed for divorce. She was a major shareholder in the advertising agency where Chad worked, and she used her influence to have him fired. Overnight, he went from a hotshot sales rep to a middle-aged man driving for a rideshare company. Liz's reputation crumbled. I forwarded evidence of the affair to her boss, along with transcripts of her mocking office policies and deadlines. The agency couldn't afford the scandal and let her go. Within 2 months, Liz and Maria were living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a rough part of town. From what I heard, Liz took a job as a waitress at a roadside diner, her once perfect nails chipped and her blonde hair dull. Maria, having lost her wealthy fiancé and the dream wedding, was working part-time at a coffee shop, her college tuition now her responsibility. I settled in Florida, far away from the wreckage I'd left behind. The sun was warm, the beaches endless, and the people didn't know me or my past. My finances were secure, tucked safely in offshore accounts, and I lived simply but comfortably. I bought a truck and a travel trailer, both in cash, and registered them under my cousin's name. Every so often, I'd hear whispers about Liz and Maria. They were struggling, barely making ends meet. Chad had vanished into obscurity, his life just as miserable as theirs. But I didn't feel pity. For 25 years, I had been the rock, the provider, the one who kept everything together. When they chose to betray me, they underestimated what I was capable of. Now, as I watched the waves crash against the shore, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. They had their choices, and I had mine.